Hello, everybody. Welcome to webinar number 4 that we've organized. Every time I organize one of these, I say, this is the last one I'm organizing. And somehow another one comes about. So this one was actually inspired because after our last session, which was talking about crystal ball gazing, we realized we should really talk to the people who are building stuff, because that allows us to know what the money's been spent on to develop the next era of products that are going to be released to the market, that everybody's going to be using, that everybody's going to be talking about. So today I've invited 5 esteemed builders in the industry, and I'm going to be introducing them, or rather, no, I'm going to let them introduce themselves as we bring everybody to the stage. So in no particular order, Max from Leia, Haley from Latera, Daniel from Legaltech, Kara from Describe.ai, and Ted from InfoDash. So everybody, we're going to give you guys 30 seconds for each of you to introduce yourselves. And at this point in time, this is your only opportunity to pitch your company to us. After this, there's no more pitching. So going in reverse order, Ted, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Ted Theodoropoulos. I'm the CEO of InfoDash, and we like to think of ourselves as the DoorDash for your data. So InfoDash is a digital workplace solution. The place knows terms like intranet and extranet, so we're intranet, extranet providers. We don't love those terms. They're a bit dated, but people know what they are. And we integrate with just about every back office legal system that there is. And we work primarily with big law firms, so 100 attorneys and up. And we provide a no-code approach to creating pages with data from different data sources. So it's a single pane of glass to create, like, let's say, a client page where you have client contacts from a CRM, you maybe have engagement letters from a DMS, you have analytics visualizations from your BI platform, and you can bring all of those things together into one place and save what's called the toggling tax, which is about 9% of your day as an information worker gets lost to context switching. So we help with that.
Thank you, Ted. Kara, you're next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cara Peterson from Describe.ai, and we are a legal research company out in Boston, Massachusetts. And we are using AI to democratize access to the law, in this case, case law. So we have about 3.3 million judicial opinions from across the United States, searchable via natural language, all for free. We are what we call a justice tech company. And so you can check it out. No sign up, no login, no fee, nothing. Just come and check it out, and you'll see the power of AI when applied to legal research.
When we were preparing for this call, Kara, you jokingly called yourself not a non-profit, but a no-profit. So
Exactly.
we're gonna cover that one a little bit later.
Okay.
To a company that is not a no-profit, Daniel, please take it away.
My name's Daniel Lewis. I lead Legal On. We are a company that provides AI contract review software to help legal teams review contracts faster and more accurately. We serve nearly 6,000 companies around the world. We've got over 500 employees. And I'm based out in San Francisco. Prior to this, I was at LexisNexis leading businesses, including things like practical guidance and secondary content. And prior to that, I joined Lexis after they'd acquired my first company, Ravel Law, which was a legal research and analytics company.
A very esteemed career. And to another person with an esteemed career, Haley, please.
Hi, I'm Haley Altman. I'm a strategic advisor at Latera. I'm a former M&A partner, and Latera has a number of different products that work across the different legal stack in a law firm, from the drafting tools that help attorneys do their work to the business development tools that help them win the work. What I've been working on recently is developing 2 of their new Gen AI products. The first one that's launched already is Dragon. It's an automated extraction tool that allows law firms to create a deal database. So taking all that critical information that are in your transactional documents, enabling you to extract it out and take that data and leverage it in all different ways. When you're drafting documents, so what's good precedent, how have you negotiated this in the past, all the way to, if I'm quoting work for a company, like, here's what we've done in the past, here's similar work product, here's how we can negotiate against this particular opposing counsel. So we want to give people access to that important data that's been stuck in documents. And Lattice, our new product that we're just launching to customers and we're talking about at ILTA, allows law firms to take all the information from different databases, financial systems, HR, their experience management systems like Foundation, as well as data from documents, and put it together so that attorneys can ask complex questions. What is the last 5 projects we've done for Microsoft where we have had an earnout and a rollover as part of our strategic documents? So taking data from different systems and allowing people to ask those key questions that help them to work smarter and win more business.
Amazing. Thank you. Max, you're up next, and I think you have a really interesting story as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Max. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Leia. We started the company a little over a year ago, and we actually had Leia as a hobby project for many, many years before GPT came. And we started the project because our friends who were becoming lawyers, they spent more time looking for things in a bunch of case files and then just putting that into Excel than doing actual legal work. And so when we just looked at the space, it seemed like most software looked like it was built in the 90s, and something had to change. So a year ago, me and 2 friends started building this. Now we're 35 people. We've raised $35 million in venture. I'm actually calling in from a law firm that I just worked with for the entire day to help them implement, basically taking SPAs and automating the creation of the board minutes from them. And so what we really do is just take LLMs and the pure delightfulness that they can bring and apply them across every type of legal task.
Thank you, Max. And very quick introduction of myself for those who don't know me. I am the CEO and founder of Cynthia. We essentially create what we call a provisions data layer. So taking all the provisions out of your contracts and then storing that in a separate database and using that data to power different workflows like multi-document comparisons and market analysis and so on. But it's not about me. It's about everybody today. And Max, you just mentioned those magic words that has grabbed everybody's attention in the last 18, 24 months, which are Gen AI. So quick show of hands around the room. Who here is not using Gen AI? All right, that's what I thought. so let's kind of like talk about something that I've observed during ILTACon, which is chatbots are sort of like losing the limelight a little bit. What does everyone think about that? What does everyone think about the chatbot as a sort of form factor? Where do you think Gen AI is really going to be most powerful and applied in your context and for your customers? So in no particular order, I'm going to go bottom right-hand corner for me, Daniel.
Not having been at ILTA, maybe I missed the bubble, but I think actually chatbots are quite an effective interface for a lot of use cases. Doesn't mean that they're the only one, but I think they're very easy to interact with. It's very conversational. You get to use English as your programming language, essentially. And I think you can start to see some transition to the voice-based interactions that will be made possible as voice gets so seamless and fast. So yeah, I wouldn't disregard chat as an interface, but obviously there's lots of things that you can do outside of that as well. Some of those are less visible to users, so they feel a little bit less magical in some ways. But I think that interactivity, the ability to interrogate and go further and ask an additional question via chat, I'm not sure there's anything quite like it at this moment.
Yeah. I was on a panel at ILTA on chatbots and the use of them. And so there were different people from law firms talking about their building. And then another woman from Adderin and I were coming from the vendor side. And when you think about it from the law firm side, they are putting that information to allow them to interrogate the information that are in their own systems and answer questions that get repeatedly asked. And I think what was super interesting is it gave their attorneys a way to easily engage with something. But they found the usage was very varied. I think the biggest problem in the chatbot world is the number of questions you have to train it on and how you need to give it the information to be able to ask it. So like people don't understand what the guidelines or the guardrails are on a chatbot. So your expectation of what information you're going to get out, you might assume the chatbot's not working, but it just wasn't trained on that level of information or that detail. So when people are making chatbots, it's like giving people the guidelines of like, what is it supposed to do? What can I ask of it? And where can I go with it? You saw it in enterprise search. Like I talked to a firm, and the most common request in a DMS enterprise search question was limitations of liability. Well, we'll return a data set that was unusable, and people would think that search didn't work. Well, sometimes it's the questioner. And so when you look at these tools that allow people to freely enter information and give them no guardrails and scope, people can find that maybe it doesn't do what they thought it was, but because they didn't have like the proper expectation set. So it's figuring out how to give people that ability to easily interact with something, but also help them understand what they should expect from it and what you hope to get out of it.
Yeah, I'm going to pile on your comment too, Horace. I think chatbots still have a lot of life left. We are just really starting to roll out chatbots in an intranet scenario, and we have one client who has recently released, and what they've done is really just kind of manage scope. So initially, it's all of their policies are in scope in terms of what the chatbot is prepared to provide information on. So a policy of any kind. This could be expense reimbursement, remote work policy, vacation, PTO, all that sort of stuff. And it is going really, really well. And over time, we have a kind of a multi-generational plan to expand the scope of that. So I still see we're still in the early stages of deploying chatbots in an intranet space.
I mean,
yeah. Sorry, Max, go ahead.
Sorry, Kara, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, I think the really interesting question isn't yes or no chatbots. It's really more about wrappers. And I think that's the key. I don't think it's obviously the way chatbots work and the interface can be extremely valuable. But the real question is, and anyone who's a big legal tech nerd like me and listens to Bob's show every week, that was the big conversation, Bob Ambrosi's conversation last week. So I think that's the actual point.
So Max, you go first, but I want to ask about wrappers, and there's so many layers I want to kind of like unwrap.
Sure. I mean,
no pun intended.
People love talking to other people, and the way that a chatbot is, I mean, it's just conversing. I think people still love giving instructions as they've always given instructions. And I think the more important part, which I think Kara is also getting onto, is what is the chat actually doing? What is it doing under the hood? And half of Leia's product lives in the chat. So I have to think it's good, right? And the reason why I think it's good is because, well, you say something to the chat or to Leia, and then it actually figures out, well, how should I accomplish that goal? And it calls on the correct tooling to achieve that end goal. And so I think it's much more about not just sending the full, well, here's the prompt and here's the RAG and just send it to GPT-4, but rather, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? Do a multi-step plan, execute it, and then give back the results.
So you've just talked about AI agents, which I'll loop back to in a second. But I think my biggest gripe with chatbots, kind of like Kara's point about wrappers, is if it's not done right, it's super shallow. And I think part of the issue I'm seeing is there are lots of thin wrappers out there. So now, among this group, how do we kind of ensure that we can give more sophisticated chatbots and not just thin wrappers?
As Casey Flaherty always does, it's like a conversation on thick wrapper versus thin wrapper applications. And like, there's so much thin wrapper applications out there where it's just like, it's like a nice skin on top of something. It makes it look pretty. It gives you the impression that it's going to do more than it is. But like a thick wrapper application is more integrated into a workflow or a process that you're looking to improve. And so if you're thinking about like what is really going to add value to people, like a standalone chatbot that just is where you can ask questions, like unless it's targeted towards a specific area, like Ted was talking, like if you know that chatbot's focused on all these policies, you know where you're going, you know the set of questions you can be asking, you have a better universe and it fits in to where you're at. But like I think for companies that are building new products, that concept of the Gen AI or the chatbot or whatever interface where the AI is doing its work fits into the process or workflow. It's not it's built into something that you're trying to accomplish. So the problem you're trying to solve, the Gen AI is part of the process that you're delivering. And it's not just this standalone thing that just has this pretty like interface around it. And so I think that's where we start to see like real value add is like, I'm solving a problem. Gen AI is one component of solving that product, and it fits into that thick wrapper of what we're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. And it's what confuses the marketplace too, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you think about the people who are purchasing these tools or evaluating these tools, mm-hmm. it's oftentimes they're not super technical, right? And so when, it's easy to throw the baby out with the bathwater in this kind of thing and like, oh, it's just a wrapper for ChatGPT, which is true in some cases. And so I think it's on our industry to be able to explain the differences, and it's pretty important.
I don't necessarily agree with that, or like I think the customer has become incredibly well educated in the last like 3 months on these topics actually, and I think it's been improving at almost the same rate as the products have been improving. So you could like fool the industry, a year ago by just having like a thin wrapper, and then continuously they are getting more educated, and the products are getting better, and they're setting a higher bar and a higher threshold for what it actually needs to deliver. And I think that's quite fun. Somebody talked about competitiveness, and I think like competitiveness in this industry is really good. It pushes the products to be better, and it pushes the customers to like really understand what they're buying.
That's true for sophisticated customers, but for justice tech people who are working to actually get these tools into people's hands who are less well served, it actually doesn't hold true. So I think it depends on who you're thinking of as the customer. But that's a broader issue that we have in the whole industry is who are we actually serving? So that's a different topic.
Well, even almost regardless of education level, I've got a lot of sympathy for buyers in this market because there are so many companies now. There's so many new companies that are starting that for any given problem that they're trying to solve, there's lots of different options now that didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago. And I think one of the magical things about LLMs is they've made it very easy to stand up something that looks good very quickly. And so it does take more poking and prodding to sort of figure out what those limitations are. And that can be hard. It's simply more time consuming. It takes more research. It takes more testing from customers to try to figure out, does this thing actually perform in day-to-day life as well as it demos in a 30-minute demo or in a 1-minute YouTube clip, right? So I think there is more research and testing required simply to get beneath the hood on some of this stuff to figure out, does it actually work well as it looks? Because the looking part is very easy to stand up something that looks good pretty quickly.
So Jamie in the chat raises this really interesting point, which is thick or thin is not the point. So it doesn't matter what the wrapper is. What matters is like it has to be effective. This raises an interesting question, and I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about the quality of OpenAI versus the quality of Claude and other models that are out there. In the experience that this group has had, where are you leaning in terms of like foundational models?
I don't mind jumping in on this because I've talked a lot about it on LinkedIn. So there is incredible parity overall if you look at the performance benchmarking, but each LLM kind of has its own strengths and weaknesses, right? So like, for example, I think from a writing perspective, Claude is far and away the best. ChatGPT and the OpenAI model is a little, the text can be a little flowery. I have not used Meta Llama, but I hear that Llama for code gen is really good. I've played with most of them, Mistral. I think that it really depends on what job you're trying to do. The custom GPTs available through OpenAI are really incredible. The amount of training information that you can apply to each custom GPT, there's way more headroom at ChatGPT than there is for Claude projects, for example. But I've done some side-by-side testing and used a smaller subset of training data, and the output is nearly identical, even though Claude has less training material to pull from. So I think that there's incredible parity these days, but each model has its own little niche that it's slightly better than. But overall, the playing field is leveling quick.
It's also about reliability. So it's not actually just about the model itself. When you have a lot of users, like we're doing millions of tokens a second sometimes, then it's not only, hey, do we want only GPT? Well, actually, we might need AWS and Bedrock as the alternative and build a router that says, hey, we're getting a lot of load. We got to send things different ways. But I do think, as Ted is mentioning or kind of alluding to, you need to be, you can't dig yourself in a ditch and say, this is what I'm going to use for all eternity, because it's very likely to change.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to build in, the multi-model modal approach to it, so that you can try for different types of documents, like for a credit agreement where we need to pull tables, like, is that going to be better at different ways? Like, based on the number of questions we need to ask of a single document at once, to filter that through, you're going to get a much quicker experience, depending on where we're pulling the data from and the types of data. And so we wanted to build into the system the ability to switch out as needed, maybe even on transaction type, maybe on data type, based on what we're looking at.
Yeah, and of course, putting all your, sorry.
No,
saying from a business perspective too, like having all your eggs in one basket is pretty risky, right? And that's not something that funders would be probably too happy about. Like you don't want to be too beholden to any one model. But we had a funny experience recently. We actually were testing something on Google Gemini, and it apologized to us for not being able to do what we wanted it to do. And it asked if it could try again. So we'll see. I'm not the tech side, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
We stopped using Google Gemini because, like, other than a really large context window, it just didn't perform as well as Claude or ChatGPT. No. And maybe Gemini 3 is going to get there, but doesn't seem to yet. So there's a couple of really interesting questions in the chat, and I'm going to kind of loop to them. First one is Greg's comment. There's also an issue of black box that vendors trying to hide from the customer, the thick and thin wrappers, etc. Max, your comment about rerouting to Bedrock, for example. Yeah. Do you tell your customers that? Like, do any of us actually?
So when I sit on like customer calls, and if there's like a technical person on the other side, very often I open up the open source GitHub repositories we are using under the hood to build our stuff. And the reason why I do that is because, well, one, I'm like an honest guy, and two, I think many of the way we partner with firms and with corporates is like a 10-year journey. And it's not only about what we have now. We've had a year and a half with the tech. It's like, what can we do with it over 10 years? And so I want them to be able to trust me and my team and say, your lawyers and your engineers are going to be the best partner for this journey. And so to get that trust, I think it's very good to be open with how you build things. And of course, I might not go into all the detail about exactly how we've done our prompting or RAG, but I'm very open to talk about, which embeddings are we using, or which chunking, parsing libraries are we using, because I think everybody just benefits from getting access to the best stuff.
So none of us on this call are actually content providers. And I think there's only 3 or 4 of those in the market. And Peter asks a really interesting question. How important is it to have alignment between our legal search vendor and the primary Gen AI tool, which I think like...
Maybe I can talk to that, because we've partnered with many content providers. We have a partnership in the UK with Prom Council, where we're using all of their expert corporate and employment data that lawyers have put together. And I think you do get a significant kind of added bonus when 1 + 1 = 3 in the end. And so I do think that that's important, and that's nice. I think it's an added benefit, but oftentimes everybody might not want to play nice, and they say, well, you're not allowed to integrate. And then what ends up happening is the end lawyer is the person suffering, because they're not getting software that could be as good as it could be. But of course, it's also a moat to sit on a lot of this data.
Yeah, Horace, I jump into because we actually provide content as well. So we've got a lot of content that we bake into the product around specific language that we think is the right language to use when revising or drafting in a contract, as well as practical guidance that explains why certain provisions matter. And we found that when we ground Gen AI in that content, it can perform much better. and we can trust it, and our users can trust that a suggested red line, for example, is grounded in trustworthy lawyer-written content versus made up word by word, right? And oftentimes, right off the shelf, ChatGPT type LLMs perform okay, and they always look very plausible. But upon further review, like it's not uncommon that they're making up language that is actually quite unusual or not market standard or totally off base. So I think we've found it's quite important and valuable to ground the LLMs in the content that we've created ourselves to make certain of the use cases much more trustworthy and authoritative.
So, Ted, do you want to take your thought first, and then I want to ask mine about expertise?
Yeah, so we are using AI technologies in a multitude of ways with information providers. So, for example, we have an announcement coming up with LexisNexis where we integrate with their API. And for firms that want to create a client page, like I talked about in the intro, one challenge that doesn't sound like it would be a big deal, but it actually is around entity matching. So you've got Bank of America and a client page, and they spell the name BANC of America for their wealth side. Sometimes it'll be Bank of America NA. Sometimes it's just the call letters BAC. And we're using tools like Azure AI Search and Azure OpenAI to help take that content provider information and bridge the gap between systems, and have found it's light years away from how we used to do this with kind of Boolean and fuzzy search logic. So we're seeing a lot of really interesting use cases that were never even really on our radar prior, but now are.
So I want to kind of go back to an earlier point, but I've actually forgotten what that point is because your comment was so good. So instead, I'm going to throw up Greg's comment, which is like the problem that the market runs into is that the startup hits a barrier when they have to buy data. Now I remember my question about expertise, and it goes to something that Damien Reel kind of throws up all the time, which is data is now the new gold. Like we can all access these large language models. We can all access these open source libraries. But what's kind of missing are two things.
Well,
One,
sorry, Horace, but you can all access the models, but it's very few people who can build really good software on it. I mean, the thing is, it's actually not about the model; it's about the software. And yes, a lot of it might be plumbing, but at the end of the day, you're going to have one thing that's extremely user-friendly. It has all of your use cases built into it. It has all of your templates. It has an integration with your DMS. It maybe hooks up to the public data. You can do a lot of things without getting access to the niche legal research market. And I think what I find very often is people might use a legal research tool to just download the PDFs and then upload them in like a tool like Leia to actually do their work. So I don't necessarily agree with what Greg's saying.
So I'm going to put a twist on that, and the twist on it is this. I think ultimately what you've just described, Max, is workflow, and user experience is workflow. But I think the two things that are missing in the market, or rather not missing in the market, the two things that are missing for a lot of players are you don't have the data, and you haven't worked out the workflows because you don't have the expertise. And to Daniel's point, the fact you're creating your own content, the fact you've got people kind of building these workflows seem to be the key difference between a lot of players. So I'm going to throw something out there for this group, and I'm going to name drop. And that is, if you look at all the people Harvey has hired, Harvey hires pretty much expert lawyers all the time. Do you think that gives them a competitive edge? Or if yes, if no, what are your thoughts?
Look, I mean, they're a team of 150 people or what? Something like that? I think so. They're 100 plus people. We're 30, and we're running into them all the time. And I don't think it's about headcount. I mean, it's sure about some of the people you get on the team, but we have 5 lawyers at Leia. They're fantastic, but I mean, maybe an advantage in some way, but maybe a disadvantage in some way. I'm not sure.
I think it depends on what product you're building. Like,
Yeah.
what problem are you building? What problem are you trying to solve? Like, how integrated is it into the lawyer's experience? So, in building extraction engine for deal points documents, like understanding like how deals close, how what's the makeup of the deal points. Like, you have to have some level of legal expertise to understand what 300 data points are important to attorneys in order to be able to look at it. You also have to know their verification workflow. How do they do things? So, having lawyers that understand processes when like the data set you're looking to pull, the workflow that you're looking to do requires understanding the legal data, having the lawyers involved in it, that's super important. So we need a credit lawyer to help us understand what are the important credit terms and how do we find them in the documents, how do we know we're accurate. So there's parts of that. But I think it's also figuring out how to partner with law firms or partner with early customers or beta customers that might be willing to help you walk through what are their workflows that they use. And a really good product manager that can actually sit through and listen and understand a workflow from start to finish. So I think in any good product build, if there's legal specific knowledge and legal specific expertise that's needed for part of the product to solve the problem, great. But then also just taking the time, and this doesn't have to be a lawyer, to understand process, how people work, is also important. So I think it's a mix, but it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
So Haley, Kara, please go ahead.
No, but if you had a thought on this, the Harvey question, keep going, because I actually wanted to jump back to Greg's question about actual access to content, but let me know if there's a moment for that.
No. Let's go back to access to content, because I was going to dive into how we all building our next big thing, but that can be next. So Kara, let's go back to content.
Awesome. So there's a connection on this panel that I don't think I realized until I got on the call, and that Daniel is largely responsible for us existing, and he probably doesn't even know it. So the reason is because back when I think you were still maybe students, we were at that event at Harvard Law together, Daniel. But you know, I don't think you recall Ravel at the time, but you know, there was this wonderful effort out of Harvard Law School where they digitized. It was, you know, of course, everybody knows about this. It's a famous story, digitizing all of the case law, the books, and wonderful Adam Ziegler stories that he tells about, you know, going off and ripping bindings off books and things like that. So anyway, folks don't know that story, look into it because it's really fascinating. But the reason why I say Daniel and his team were responsible for us getting started is because that's where we started with our data that we got was from the Harvard Case Law Access Project. So the data ran out at the time in 2017 for reasons that Daniel could explain. But so access to this actual case law is really important, like from not only a copyright perspective, but just having access to the right tools. So the Free Law Project out in California picked up kind of where the Case Law Project left off. And so if people don't know them, that is an incredible resource for getting actual foundational data if people don't know about it. And I would say that in the era of the trial against Ross, it's pretty important that we talk about how are people getting there, at least if they're looking at published case law, how people are accessing that, because you can get yourself into some pretty serious trouble that way. So I do think for the lay people out there, you know, when you think about judicial opinions, and of course those belong to people and they can do whatever they want with them. And it's like, it doesn't quite work that way. So that's probably a whole separate show. But when you get into the foundational stuff, it's pretty fascinating. So Daniel, thank you for your work, because you got us started. We appreciate you.
Well, that's great. I'm super glad to hear it. And that was exactly the intent, to like help other businesses try to be able to build on top of the content as well, so that nobody else had to go through the brain damage that we did and putting it together.
We appreciate you taking the brain damage for us. We like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I actually didn't know that connection either. So,
Yeah.
so that's an incredible connection. Now, we are on a half hour, and I do want to take us back to the key question that we all have, which is looking at the state of the market and looking at each of our markets separately. What is next? What do you think your customers are jumping up and down and screaming for? And I'm actually going to go to Kara first, because Kara, your market is so different from all of ours. You're doing access to justice.
Right.
What are the people asking for?
Yeah, well, it depends on which people we mean. So if you think about the access to justice crisis, there's so many layers to it. But You can look at it from sort of a humanistic and a wanting to do good side, where it's like, this is wrong and this is unethical and this is a grave injustice that people don't have access to the legal information or the legal services that they need. If you want to be a little less altruistic about it, you can look at it as a capitalist and say, holy moly, that is a big latent market that could be worked. So it's only in a weird sphere like legal tech that this kind of latent market would exist. So I think the opportunities are incredible for entrepreneurs, but it is also a really, really important time for people to keep their social justice and AI for good hats on, because we have the potential to use AI to really, really level this playing field. But it's only going to happen if we decide to build it that way. And the model we have out there for funding and for what companies get attention or sort of momentum is based on, who's going to maybe be a unicorn. But I think we can't forget that there's other things that we're responsible for right now. So our customers, so to speak, we're a free product right now, but we have several paid tiers and some really exciting stuff coming in the next few months, is to create an accessible alternative for people who need it. So that's all the way from incarcerated people to people dealing with immigration issues, housing issues, legal aid societies, you name it. But it's not just people living in poverty. It's also middle income Americans also don't get the services they need. So our thesis is that we don't want, and I have stats if you want to go over them, we don't want the AI revolutions to just make the already well-served white dudes who are doing really well just do better. Like, let's not waste this moment on that.
That's really interesting. I'll loop back to you later about how you're deciding what your end customers are looking for, because like I think your sector is so much less visible, at least to me. But let's kind of go to the opposite extreme, which is people who are very vocal and always ask for things. And Haley, you work at Latera, and so I'm sure you hear so much feedback about what the market's looking for. What do you think is kind of the market jumping up and down for? And what is your market?
Yeah, I mean, the hard part is our market is so big and we serve so many different areas, from, drafting to firm intelligence to kind of business systems to transaction management solutions. So I think what the market is looking for, what we hear a lot, is they want to see the evolution of the tools that they have using the technology that's out there. So I know Latera right now is doing a whole big thing on this Microsoft Word add-in, making it so that people can actually do things, leverage Gen AI, leverage the tools that they have that they want to use in terms of drafting where they're working. So can I be in Outlook and have an add-in that helps me figure out what I need to do, who I need to bring in, who has the expertise or skills? So I have a foundation system that tells me what our experience management is. I'm drafting an email saying, hey, yeah, we can work on this. I'm going to add these 2 people to the team, and I need to know like kind of what people are doing. Or I'm in Word and I want to run a comparison and I want to pull all this information together. I want to be able to use more tools that help me do the work I want to do smarter, faster, and where I am. So I think we're hearing a lot of how do we take the current suite of Latera tools and evolve it for the future to really enhance what people are doing. And so I think we see it a lot. We see it in a lot of different ways. Like, I want access to my data. I want to take unstructured data, structure it, and allow people to use it wherever they're working. And so we're trying to take that across our different tool sets, bringing in Dragon and Lattice as the added pieces to enable that work to happen. But it's really like we have a lot of work to do, and we want to kind of enhance that work and make it easier to do where people are. Less context switching, less system switching, and things like that.
Can I just comment on the question from Mark? We actually built that, right? So we had as a use case pop up. The question was, has somebody built an AI product that recommends like which lawyer is the best for something? So you have something in Leia called organization databases. And in that database, we just put like everybody's bio. And then you can just ask Leia like, hey, I got this case or this thing coming in, who's the best person to work on it? And then it will pull the right one.
And we do that kind of with Lattice, but it's like we take the bios, clients you've worked on, industry specific data, and then you can add like hours, like so you can see like what type of work, because we have Clocktomizer, which tells you what work someone's done. So you pair like what actual work have they done for which client in which industry and against their bio, and then you can say what lawyers have done this type of of work. So it's the goal is to take all that area. So that will be part of the Lattice product too.
That was one of the first things we built when we never released it. What we did was we took every document a lawyer's worked on, vectorized that, and then said, okay, the average of all those vectors is a representation of that lawyer's experience. It's actually really bad. But that's why we never released it, because it's like super like you're generalizing to a single point. But I want to throw to Ted, because Ted, what Haley was just talking about, like cutting that friction and what lawyers are asking for, are you hearing the same thing in the intranet, extranet sort of space?
You know, this may ruffle some feathers, but the legal tech market is actually very small in comparison and doesn't move terribly fast. Just if you look at, for example, I spent 10 years in financial services. The fintech market, it's night and day, right? They have a ton more money. Legal's catching up a little bit because of the alignment of AI with new capabilities in the space, but historically, legal tech has fallen, is way below the standard innovation line, and it's largely driven by capital markets. Some people may not agree with that, but that's been my observation. In my particular space, it's been even worse because there's only been two players. You have one intranet player, legal only intranet player in the space that got bought in 2017, and they've done absolutely nothing with the product, which we all know that story. It happens many times. And then on the extranet side, there's one player in the space, and they got acquired in 2019, and not a lot has happened either. So like our customers are starving for innovation. They've really been deprived of new ideas and ways of doing things in the space. So we're really focusing on that and actually bringing those two things together, intranet and extranet, and making it one. So yeah, it's I think there's a bit of a renaissance going on in legal tech now because AI has really focused a lot of investment there. All you got to do is look at some of the valuations. I mean, Clio and Harvey in the last 30 days and see just how optimistic people are. But yeah, historically, it's not been great. It's not been great. And I think that's starting to change some, and it's a welcome change to our customers.
I disagree with some of that, Ted. I mean, I think to start with, Clio and Harvey are totally different companies. Clio's been around for 10 plus years. They're serving tens of thousands of customers. They're getting valued at 12x or something revenue. Harvey's being valued in a much more speculative way. And they serve totally different segments, right? I mean, serving small law, there's 100,000 plus customers. And I know Clio would define their market as even much more bigger than that as you look at mid-sized firms and up. But if you're talking about companies that are just focused on serving law firms of 100 or more, yeah, I wish somebody had told me when I started Ravel that there are only like 500 law firms out there that have 100 attorneys or more. I think I would have understood the market dynamics and what we needed to do very differently. Because of those 500, there's very few that actually move quickly, right? I see folks like Greg Lambert on the call. Like, Greg moves fast, but we spoke with many firms who were like, come back once you've sold to literally every one of our peers because we'll be the last one to buy. And so that's a very different dynamic. And I don't think they're typically jumping up and down for much of anything. They're interested in learning, but their ability to move quickly is very different than what, at Legalon we're seeing in the in-house space, where again, there's tens of thousands of companies out there, all of whom are drowning in contracts every single day. And they're looking very aggressively for new technology. So small law, corporate, large law, very different dynamics, very different sizes too.
Yeah, and I would add, sorry, no, please go ahead, Ted.
I just wanted a real quick comment on Daniel's mention about only 12x. Only 12x revenue. Our bars have been raised to unrealistic expectations. 12x revenue is, if you're at a 30% margin, that's a 36-year break-even time horizon for the acquiring company. So it's, again, barring growth, and so it's like the zero interest rate era really set everybody's expectations on multiples to unrealistic levels. 12x is not sustainable. 12x multiples, and I think that we've just lost our, I don't know, our expectations have become a bit skewed in my perspective.
I mean, as a Latera's PE backed, and I helped buy 10 companies. So it's like the multiples that are out there now. I think when we start to see what the TAMs are, it's like, so what people's multiples are and their valuations are, then you have to match it against the potential TAM for the industry. To Daniel's point, 500 large law firms, they can pay how much for their stuff. So you can work backwards from that. And I know Harvey has a plan of going past like the standard subscription contracts within law firms. Or I'd imagine so, or they wouldn't be able to get the valuation. But I think as companies are coming up in these markets and they're seeing the Casetext exit, they're seeing the valuation of Harvey, and they're seeing everyone's valuation expectations are going crazy. And their valuation expectations of what they can get in early rounds of funding are setting them up for a really tough run when they get to potential exits or second rounds of funding, because meeting those, showing the ARR growth that you can have with the burn that you need to, most PE companies want to figure out how to get in an acquisition, how to get to break even. And so if you're really starting to set up your business, if you're looking at that first round of funding, a lot of times we fall into the trap of the higher the valuation, the better I'm doing. And that's the less of the company I have to sell. And that's great. But you have to think of it in terms of the context of your total TAM, what Ted was talking about, how a PE company will evaluate how this is going to take, how the acquirer looks at how this gets paid back over time. These are all really important things. I think there's going to be a whole host of companies that raised at valuations that are going to be very difficult to even match for a second round. You're going to see down rounds. You're going to see a lot of things that are a lot harder for people to understand. PE looks at multiples of 5 to 7x ARR, or an EBITDA multiple, which is really hard in a growing SaaS business to metrics. So it's exciting and it gets everyone really energized, and it has many downstream negatives.
So not an intentional transition, but Max is the one that hasn't spoken about this yet. So Max, you're one of these.
You're all bashing on my business here. Look, I think AI is just an unprecedented efficiency gain in terms of the things you can build. And there's a lot of existing software that's sprinkling in AI, and they're flipping their, new Gen AI product, and they're upselling their ACV 2 to 3x. But I think you can just approach this from another way, where most of knowledge work is going to be fundamentally rewired, and there's only going to be a few players to eat a lot of that cake, and that cake is going to be really big. And that's why I raised a lot of venture. That's why we're going really hard at it. And we're also seeing that in the growth in the terms of number of customers we're signing up and the ARR, right? For sure, there's a lot big shoes to fill. But I think that's all for someone like myself, that's also extremely motivating. We're here, I sit in Stockholm across the street from Spotify and Klarna. And we look at that and we take their best engineers and then we go even faster, we're just excited about that journey.
So steering the question in a different way, let me ask you, what is everyone building next? What is, kind of steering the question from what's customers jumping up and down for to now, what are you building next? And I realize I haven't answered any of these questions. So I'm going to defer and throw this one to Kara first. Kara, what are you building next? You're muted.
Oh. Am I good? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure this is a host's worst nightmare when someone says this, but I can't exactly tell you because it's pretty secret sauce. But suffice it to say that it is going to be some tools that really leverage the data set that we have and serves a currently completely unserved niche in the market that we think is going to make quite a big impact. But really for us, as they say, having all of your data is your gold, so it's your oil. So we have such a huge database of, 23 million, I think, summaries at this point. So we're really using that to create new value on top of it. And I wish I could say more, but in a few weeks to months, I will be able to. Very exciting stuff.
You up. Ted, what about you? What feature or product are you building next?
Yeah, so we're going. We have a couple interesting things on the roadmap. I'll just, in the sake of brevity, I'll try and zero in. We're bringing together the intranet and extranet. It really makes no sense. It did back when everybody had on-prem infrastructure and a firewall, and then you had stuff outside the firewall, maybe sitting in a DMZ, but that's no longer the case. Even the big firms are finally moving in earnest to the cloud. So we are unifying collaboration, so internal and external facing collaboration, so that you only have to license one product. The one provider on the extranet or the external facing collaboration side has gone unchallenged since their founding in, I don't know, 15 plus years, and their pricing reflects that. Everybody knows who I'm talking about here, and they need a little competition, and we plan on helping them out with that. That's what's next.
Daniel, for the in-house market, what is next for you?
Well, so as I mentioned, we focus on contract review, and I think we're actually just starting to scratch the surface on this. There's so much more that can be done, and I'd say like in general across the market, we're still very early in the sort of latest generation of what people can do with Gen AI. So we're focused on going deeper, like improving accuracy, improving capabilities to interrogate a specific contract before you sign it, ability to apply your own custom playbooks and develop those so you can combine kind of what we can do for you off the shelf with what you may want to add from your own sets of knowledge. So yeah, I think, I see folks talking about agents in the chat, and there's definitely things that are agent-like in that. And like Max mentioned, routing different questions to the right places. But I also think there's a lot of just basic building that can take place to meet what we hear customers asking for, which is like, look, they don't really care how the sausage is made. They just want it to work. They want things to be accurate. They want it to be trustworthy. They want it to be fast. They want it to be intuitive. Whether you're building it with LLMs or anything else, that people don't really care as long as it's private and secure from a technology perspective.
So we mentioned agents, but Max, you take it away, please.
I mean, it's so weird that it's gotten this like upswing for the marketing thing. We've been doing it since like August of last year, September, I think. Like it was just like the first thing we implemented, right? Like it's not rocket science. It's literally an LLM just calling on a tool that has a description and it knows when to use it. Like it's not this whole magic wizard thing that everybody has to like understand, I think. In terms of what we're building and what everybody's asking for, I agree with Daniel. Like people are just asking for things that work. People are so starved of software that is just like fun, delightful, that works, that doesn't break, that's always like 100% uptime. And so frankly, like that's what we're focused on. We're doing a lot of reliability stuff. This week we're optimizing upload speeds. Like it's not the juiciest part, but when a partner gets an idea to drop their entire Dropbox folder into Leia, like shit just has to work.
Yeah. I think that is such an incredible point, Max, because it is like that's what people want. People want things that work. I think for us on the like, what are we building next? Like obviously we're continuing to focus on Dragon and the different transaction types, multi-document sets. Like how do you review a document set as a whole and understand the transaction across a set of documents? But I think one of the comments in the chat was about like how is this going to work with transactional lawyers in terms of how do they practice? Like can they access their own precedent? That's kind of part of what we were thinking of integrating Dragon into the Latera Word products, because if you can understand the data that is in a document, it can help you better understand what precedent now fits your new LOI or your new term sheet. So you know where to start, but you also know what the differentiating points are. So you can pull additional information to like do that. That's a like, there's more work to do to make this more workflow efficient and things like that. But at the end of the day, the starting focus was, can we extract the information we need to from documents quickly, effectively, and at the accuracy level? Can we do that across transaction types? And that's what you focus on every single day. How accurate is it? How can we make it better? How do we make it just work?
So what Peter wrote in the chat, we actually just shipped that internally. So basically, instead of having a prompt library, because a prompt is just like one thing, you can now sequentially like put them together. And then, a block can also reference if you're doing one of these extractions that we've been talking about, right? So yeah, that's happening.
So to talk about the boring stuff, I spent like an hour and a half on the phone this morning with my team, basically saying, where should we have the upload button? There, or there? And it's really like, looking at your users and looking at their behaviors and saying, well, what do they want? How do you make it efficient? How do you make them not turn off your software because they get frustrated? But let's turn the question around. What are we not building? and I'll go around the room of asking the question, what is, of all the things that you've seen, what have you decided to say no to? So Ted, I want to start with you because you look like you're contemplating something.
Yeah, gosh, we get asked a lot because in the intranet space, InfoDash is almost like a toolkit that you can really build anything with. We even do search. So I had a post recently about enterprise search being dead, and I literally have never seen an enterprise search initiative have a positive ROI. I've had a few that have met expectations. Most of them haven't even gone there. But we do a little bit of search, and clients have been pulling us in that direction and want us to do more. And we leverage Azure OpenAI search, and we're never going to go crawl and re-index your entire DM corpus. I know there are some platforms out there that do that, but it is like killing a fly with a sledgehammer. One of our clients was spending $20,000 a month on Azure consumption doing that. That's just Azure consumption, not including the search framework licensing to get in there. They were spending over $500,000. And it's just, we've decided strategically that's not where we're going to go. You're on mute now.
Oh, sorry,
Horace.
Oh, sorry. I was saying, Max, what have you decided you're not building?
We're not fine-tuning models. I think that's a huge time sink, utter waste of time and energy, natural resources. No, like the whole thing. Like we're just not doing it. At least not until the point where it makes sense. As long as the general models keep improving at the rate there are, and there are multiple options to choose from, like we're diehard, GPT or Claude API calls.
Yeah, I think everyone learned the lesson from Bloomberg GPT, or they should have.
I mean, the thing was, like, when Harvey or like all these other people were fine-tuning models, we had 50K. That was my funding. And like, I had to go up against these guys with like 100th of the funding. And, we were paying it ourselves like 15K, no, not 15K SEK. So 1.5K US in the beginning to like buy noodles for the first 6 months just to get this thing up and going. And when you don't have Azure credits, you don't even think about fine tuning because you don't have any money. That was a good choice.
Very wise. Haley, what are you not building?
We aren't fine tuning either. We looked at it. We have lots of data, and like when you have lots of data, there's a question of do you spend your time like doing fine tuning your own model, creating it. We have a lot. We actually just focused on like what did we actually want to do, like what were we trying to accomplish, and the one thing we did do is we actually don't, when we do other extractions, we actually don't just use Gen AI. We actually looked at, from like our experience with Kira and things like that, what are the best ways to get different specific pieces of information. So the tool set as a whole is like, we need to accomplish a task. We want to accomplish a task effectively and efficiently. And so what do we need to be able to use, from different parsing technologies to semantic search to natural language processing to traditional, all the different components. And so that we looked at the scope of things that you can do and then honed in on what did we need to do to complete the thing that we wanted to. Tried to not go too far past what we wanted to accomplish.
Interesting. Kara, what are you not building? Oh, you're on mute again. Wait, let me unmute you.
Thank you. We are not building anything that is even remotely close to legal advice. We are a legal information company. We've had, we take a lot of feedback from our users, and a lot of our roadmap is informed from that. But anything that even gets close to that sort of evolution in the product is not where we are involved.
Oh man, I was hoping you wouldn't say that. I was hoping you'd say you were, because there is this question in the chat about UPL risk, and I collectively as an industry, I would love to see some businesses build directly at the heart of serving consumers with legal advice.
Okay, so
UPL rules are so.
I know it's so hard.
Yeah.
But you just gave me the perfect opening. So I'm the communications chair at this awesome group called the Justice Technology Association. If you haven't heard of the group, it's just a nonprofit. It's a group of members. There's some incredibly cool products in there that are doing exactly that. They're direct to consumer justice tech solutions, and there's some really badass ones in there. So check it out. Not us, but there's some really, really good ones in there, especially getting excited with the whole kind of like justice worker movement and all that stuff too. Like there's some really, really cool synergies there. So take a look. It's not going to be us, but it'll be someone in that group, I betcha.
Thank you. And Daniel, what are you not building?
It's actually been really interesting. Almost everything that we hear from our customers of things that they want, we're like, cool, that fits right in the roadmap. We haven't been getting people asking for stuff that takes us off into left field, which is a little bit different than the first startup that I ran, where we had to be much more judicious and being like, no, we've got a vision and we're going to get some input that takes us off in the wrong direction. So yeah, I'd actually say, it sort of goes back to my earlier point. What people are asking for is very fundamental to just helping them in our space review contracts faster and more accurately. And so it all ties together quite nicely, actually, as we think about our product roadmap.
Amazing. Well, guys, this has been incredible. I know it was like so many different voices, so many kind of diverse things that we're all looking at. But I think if we kind of distill it down, it sounds like we're all driven by what our customers are asking for. And it sounds like we're not being pulled away by fancy requests and fancy technology, which is really, really nice to see. Although Jamie asked, is nobody building AGI? And my answer is, Jamie, I haven't told you guys what I'm building. Maybe I'm building AGI. And then like when I have an account like Sam Altman, it's going to be all about AGIs. So just watch this space. But no, this has been incredible. Thank you, everybody. And hopefully you guys will have many incredible successes. I know all of you are just amazing people. And thank you for making the time and talking to us today. So nothing but love here, guys.
Thanks for doing this, Horace. This was fun.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Thank you so much.
All right.
See you guys again soon. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.